All right, so learning your first beat. We're going to start out with a simple rock beat today. The finished product is going to sound like this. Cool, so I find the easiest way to go about this for a beginner is to start off counting. So in order to do that, first we got to establish our tempo or the speed of our beat. So let's just keep steady time on the hi-hat. So here we go. So when we count, in this case at least, we're going to count from 1 to 4, and then we're going to start back at 1. So that's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so every group from 1 to 4 is called a measure. And when we play on, I guess, on the number, so on every time we say 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, when we play right on that, we would refer to that as the downbeat. So what we did there is we played from 1 to 4 on each downbeat twice. So we played 2 measures of downbeats. Sometimes you'll hear measures referred to as bars. So you can say 2 measures of downbeats, or we did 2 bars of downbeats. So in music, obviously, we want to play in between the downbeats as well, because there's a lot of space in there to fill. So if we're going to put a beat directly in between the downbeats, we usually refer to that as an upbeat. And when we count that, we usually say and. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to play a couple measures of downbeats and upbeats, upbeats being directly in between the downbeats. So here's what that's going to sound like. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Cool. So really, that is the part for your right hand, if you're right-handed, on the hi-hat for this particular beat. So I would start off, practice that, count it out loud. It helps you to get a little bit of a reference frame, or counting is really just a really good guide to use. So practice that. Try and keep steady time and use a metronome if you've got one. Okay, so the next part is, of course, to add the bass drum and the snare drum. So I'm just going to play the bass drum and the snare drum parts, and I'll count them out loud so that we know where they're at. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So as you probably heard, the bass drum happens for this particular beat on the 1 and the 3 of each measure, and the snare drum happens on the 2 and the 4. The snare drum on the 2 and 4 is pretty standard for most pop or rock sort of beats. So once you get that down, same thing, kind of play it and count it. So the next piece is just putting it all together, and it's really just a exercise of coordination, kind of like patting your head and rubbing your belly at the same time. You kind of just have to stumble through it at first until you kind of get it. But what I like to do when learning something new is to just do 2 limbs at a time. So you can do the hi-hat with the snare drum, or the hi-hat with the bass drum, or like I just did with the bass drum and the snare drum. So just the hi-hat and the snare drum would sound like this. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And then just the hi-hat and the bass drum sound like this. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. So yeah, so next part is just putting them all together. And what I would encourage you to do is if you're doing two limbs at a time, I would go ahead and just do that for a few measures, and then try and maybe add whichever limb you're missing, be it the kick drum or the snare drum. And then if you do mess up, I would encourage you to just keep your hi-hat going. Excuse me, and try not to stop. You can always count yourself in again. So with the hi-hat. So there you go. So that'd be the first one. And I do like to go through another one, just so you can start playing music hopefully as soon as possible, or playing along with your favorite songs. So that first one, if you've got a song that you really want to play through or play along to, and it might be a little fast. So if you were gonna do that first one, you'd have to play it like, which is really, that's ridiculous for a beginner. So what you can do is just do half the amount of notes on the hi-hat. So you can do instead of on all the downbeats and the upbeats, you can do it just on the downbeats. So that would sound like this. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Which you might be saying to yourself, well, that seems a lot easier than the first one. And it kind of is, but I think the first one, excuse me, it's kind of like it's kind of like your classic, first beat. And it's really standard, and I think it's doable for a beginner. But, just learn them both. They're both fun to play, and they're both really usable. So for the second one, obviously you're only doing half of the stuff with your right hand. So you can play that a little bit faster, and something that you can do, especially if you're doing something that's maybe a little bit heavier, is you can take this right hand, put it on the ride cymbal or the crash cymbal, and now it sounds like this. And of course, that's a lot easier to play a little bit faster. So. Cool. So hopefully that gets you playing along with some of your favorite songs. I think as soon as you can do that, I would just go for it. That's the funnest thing. So as soon as you can start having fun on the drums, that's the thing to do. So thanks for watching. Hope this helps, and we'll see you next time.